What happens when you discover that everything you believed about your identity for 30 years was a lie, and you find out live, on national television? Dr. Phil held the sealed white envelope in both hands, staring at it for what felt like an eternity. The studio had gone completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. He looked up at the cameras and said something no one expected. "Stop the tape." What happened in the next 47 seconds would become one of the most powerful moments in daytime television history. 24 hours earlier, the Dr. Phil show had received what seemed like a routine submission. Sarah Mitchell, 52, had written in claiming her elderly father, Robert, had revealed on his deathbed that she might not be his biological daughter. Her mother had passed away 15 years prior, taking whatever secrets she had to the grave. Sarah had lived her entire life as Robert Mitchell's daughter, until 3 weeks ago, when everything she knew began to crumble. The show's producers had seen thousands of paternity cases. But something about Sarah's letter was different. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. "I need to know who I am before I lose him completely," she had written. "He has stage 4 cancer. We have maybe 2 months. Please help us find the truth." Dr. Phil had read the letter himself, which he rarely did with intake submissions. He made a decision that surprised his entire production team. Bring them in. Tomorrow. But nobody in that building knew that this case would shatter every protocol they had. Sarah arrived at the Paramount lot at 6 a.m., 3 hours before her scheduled appearance. She hadn't slept. Her father Robert, frail and using a walker, moved slowly through the backstage corridors. A production assistant offered them coffee. Sarah's hands shook so badly she couldn't hold the cup. "What if he's not my dad?" she whispered to no one in particular. "What if my whole life has been—" She couldn't finish the sentence. At 8:47 a.m., Dr. Phil arrived at the studio. He did something he almost never did. He went directly to the green room where Sarah and Robert were waiting. No cameras. No producers. Just him. He sat down across from them and said quietly, "Before we do this, I need you both to understand something. Once we open that envelope, there's no going back. Whatever's in there will change your lives. Are you absolutely certain you want to know?" Robert, his voice barely above a whisper, responded, "I've loved her for 52 years. That won't change. But she deserves the truth." Sarah nodded, tears already forming. "I need to know who I am." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. The show began at 10 a.m. as scheduled. The audience filed in, expecting a typical paternity episode. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage with his characteristic confidence, but those who knew him well noticed something different in his eyes, a heaviness, a preparation for something significant. "Today's show is about identity," he began. "About the fundamental question every human being asks: who am I? Where did I come from? And what happens when the answer to that question isn't what you thought it was for half a century?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the usual setup. Sarah walked onto the stage first, visibly trembling. The audience applauded politely, but the energy was different, subdued, almost reverent. She sat in the guest chair, gripping the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. Dr. Phil sat across from her, leaning forward. "Sarah, tell us what brought you here today." She took a shaky breath. 3 weeks ago, my father, the man I've called Dad my entire life, told me that my mother confessed something to him before she died. Something she made him promise never to tell me. And what was that? That he might not be my biological father." The audience gasped. Dr. Phil raised his hand gently, quieting them. "How did that make you feel?" he asked, his voice soft but direct. Like the ground disappeared. Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Every memory, every moment, every time someone said I had his eyes or his laugh, was it all a lie? Am I even a Mitchell?" Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Dr. Phil stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. He looked directly at the camera, not at Sarah, not at the audience, but straight into the lens, speaking to every person watching at home. I want to talk to you for a moment, he said. Identity isn't about DNA. It's about love, sacrifice, and showing up every single day. But human beings need truth. We need to know where we came from. And sometimes that truth is complicated. He turned back to Sarah. Your father is backstage. He wanted to be here for the results. Should we bring him out? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Robert Mitchell walked slowly onto the stage, using his walker. The audience rose to their feet, not applauding, just standing in respect. This man was dying, and he was spending some of his final days facing a truth that terrified him. He sat next to Sarah. She immediately reached for his hand. Dr. Phil sat back down. Robert, why did you wait until now to tell her? Robert's voice was weak but steady. My wife, she begged me never to tell. She said it would destroy our family. I kept that promise for 15 years after she died. But when the doctors told me I had months left, I realized I couldn't let Sarah live with questions after I'm gone. She deserves to know the truth. Even if that truth changes everything? Even then. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the white envelope. The DNA results. Everyone in the studio leaned forward simultaneously. Before we open this, Dr. Phil said, I need both of you to understand something. I've been doing this for 22 years. I've seen DNA results reunite families and I've seen them tear families apart. But here's what I know. Biology is one thing. Family is another. He looked at Robert. You raised her. You were there for every scraped knee, every school play, every heartbreak. That doesn't disappear because of what's in this envelope. He looked at Sarah. And you loved this man as your father for 52 years. That love is real, no matter what these results say. The envelope sat on his lap, unopened. Are you ready? He asked. Sarah and Robert both nodded, gripping each other's hands tighter. Dr. Phil opened the envelope slowly. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the results. And then he did something that shocked everyone. He folded the paper back up. Hold on, he said. He stood up and walked toward the producer's booth at the back of the studio. The cameras followed him, confused. The audience didn't know what to do. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil returned to the stage 2 minutes later. In his hand was not just the DNA results, but a second envelope, brown, worn, clearly old. While you were in the green room this morning, Dr. Phil said, I asked my team to do something. We contacted the hospital where you were born, Sarah. We pulled every record we could find. He held up the brown envelope. This is your original birth certificate. The one filed the day you were born. Sarah's eyes widened. What does it say? It lists Robert Mitchell as the father. Robert's head dropped. Relief washed over him, but Dr. Phil wasn't finished. But there's something else in these hospital records. A notation that was sealed by court order in 1973. The room went cold. Your mother filed paperwork 3 days after your birth requesting that the father's name be changed on the birth certificate. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Robert looked up, confusion and pain mixing on his face. Dr. Phil sat back down, now holding both envelopes. Here's what we know from these records. Your mother was married to Robert when you were born. But she had a brief separation from him 9 months before your birth. During that time, she had a relationship with another man. The audience was frozen. When she got back together with Robert, she was already pregnant. She told him you were his daughter. And for your entire life, he believed that and loved you unconditionally. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. So she lied to me? She made a choice, Dr. Phil said carefully. A choice to protect her family. To give you a father who would love you. Who would be there. And he was. Dr. Phil paused, holding both envelopes. The studio waited. These DNA results, Dr. Phil said, tapping the white envelope, tell us about biology. But Robert, you want to know what else I found in those hospital records? Robert looked up, tears streaming down his face. The other man, the biological father, signed away all parental rights in 1973. He wanted nothing to do with you, Sarah. He walked away before you were even a year old. Sarah began sobbing. Robert pulled her close. But you know who was there? Dr. Phil continued, his voice rising with emotion. This man right here. This man who taught you to ride a bike. Who walked you down the aisle. Who showed up every single day for 52 years, whether you shared his DNA or not. The audience erupted in applause. Several people were crying. Dr. Phil held up the white envelope one final time. Do you still want to know what this says? Sarah looked at Robert. Robert looked at Sarah. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Finally, Sarah spoke. I already know what it says. It says he's not my biological father. That's right, Dr. Phil confirmed. Then I don't need to see it, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. Because he's my dad. He's always been my dad. And nothing in that envelope changes that. The studio exploded in applause. People were on their feet, crying, hugging strangers. Dr. Phil stood and walked over to Sarah and Robert. He knelt down between their chairs. This, he said quietly, is what family looks like. Not biology. Not DNA. But love, commitment, and showing up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. I've arranged for both of you to have access to grief counseling and family therapy for as long as you need it. There are going to be complicated emotions ahead. But you don't have to face them alone. He handed the card to Sarah. She took it, still clutching her father's hand with the other. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling was even more powerful. When the show ended, Dr. Phil did something else unexpected. He asked the audience to remain seated. No one left. I want to talk to you all for a moment, he said, speaking now as a psychologist, not a TV host. What you just witnessed isn't just about one family. It's about redefining what family means. He gestured to Sarah and Robert, still seated on stage. We live in a world obsessed with biology. DNA tests, ancestry websites, genetic heritage. And those things matter. They tell us where we came from. But they don't tell us who we are. The audience listened in absolute silence. Who we are is defined by the people who show up. The people who stay. The people who love us when we're unlovable, who support us when we're broken, who stand by us when the truth is hard. He walked back to the center of the stage. Robert is dying. In a few months he'll be gone. But Sarah will carry his legacy forever, not because of DNA, but because of every moment he chose to be her father. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the taping, Dr. Phil met with Sarah and Robert privately in his office. The cameras were off. The staff had given them privacy. I need you both to understand something, Dr. Phil said, sitting across from them. The biological father has no legal rights. He signed them away decades ago. But if Sarah ever wants to find him, to get medical history or just to understand that part of her story, my team will help. Sarah shook her head. I don't need to find him. I found everything I needed 52 years ago. Robert, weak and exhausted, smiled through his tears. I was so afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if you knew, you'd love me less. That I wouldn't be enough. Dad, Sarah said firmly, using that word with intention. You were always enough. You are enough. And you'll always be my father. 3 months later, Robert Mitchell passed away peacefully at home. Sarah was holding his hand. At his funeral, Sarah read a letter she had written. In it, she thanked him for every Little League game, every parent-teacher conference, every time he showed up when it mattered. She never mentioned DNA. She never mentioned biology. She simply said, You taught me that being a father has nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with love. You chose me every single day. And I will carry that choice with me forever. The episode aired 6 weeks after Robert's death, per the family's request. It became the most watched episode in Dr. Phil's history, not because of drama or conflict, but because of love. The clip went viral, shared millions of times with captions like, "This is what real family looks like," and "DNA doesn't make you a parent, love does." Dr. Phil later reflected on the episode in an interview. "People ask me all the time about my most memorable cases. This one changed me. It reminded me why I do this work. Not for ratings or drama, but to help people find truth, and sometimes that truth is that love matters more than biology ever could." The white envelope with the DNA results was never opened on camera. After the show, Dr. Phil gave it to Sarah sealed. "If you ever want to open it, that's your choice," he told her. Sarah took it home and placed it in a box with her father's belongings, his watch, his ring, a photo of them at her wedding. "It sits there unopened," she said in a follow-up interview, "and it will stay that way. Because I know who my father was. And no piece of paper will ever change that." Dr. Phil kept the brown hospital envelope, the one with the amended birth certificate. In his office, there's a wall dedicated to cases that changed him. Among the photos and letters, that brown envelope holds a place of honor. Not because of the secrets it revealed, but because of the truth it affirmed. Family is defined by presence, not genetics. The episode's legacy extended far beyond television. Support groups for adoptive families, step-parents, and non-biological caregivers began using the clip in their materials. "You don't have to share DNA to share love," became a rallying cry for families built not by blood, but by choice. This is what Dr. Phil understood that day: the most powerful truth isn't always the one written in our genes. It's the truth written in moments, in showing up, in sacrifice, in unconditional love. Robert Mitchell may not have given Sarah his DNA, but he gave her something far more valuable: a lifetime of being chosen, every single day, to be loved as a daughter. And that truth, unlike the one sealed in that white envelope, was something no test could ever measure or diminish. The story of Sarah and Robert became a reminder that in a world increasingly defined by genetics and biology, the most important bonds are still the ones we choose to honor, not because we have to, but because we want to. Because that's what real family looks like.